Hello, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Tonight, we got a little bit of a panel discussion going on. The four of us are going to be discussing uh, can the Southern Baptist Convention be saved? If so, how? So, hopefully, this will be an optimistic and depressing conversation at the same time, probably, because I think, if this is going to happen, we're going to have to face some pretty hard truths. So, Ray, Fava's your host. Anthony is my co-host. We have special guest Jeff Wright and Michael Clary, who's a first timer on the Evangelical Dark Web. So welcome to the program. Now, I believe we should be live on. Yep, we are live. Cool. So sometimes it delays on when it sends out. So that saying, quick word that you can support Evangelical Dark Web at our Patreon-like system at evangelicaldarkweb.org/join. That's linked in the description below. It gives you access to bonus content and some behind-the-scenes stuff as well with that. So there's a lot to discuss tonight with the Southern Baptist Convention. Let's just kind of go big picture. What was your overall takeaway from Indianapolis? I guess since Anthony and I talked about this last week, we'll go Jeff and then Michael to answer our opening question.
Well, this is probably more middle ground of an answer than maybe people would expect from me. The Southern Baptist Convention is in worse shape than I thought, but there is more to work with than I thought as well. We're fighting institutions that have an agenda, and it's working. But I think you can see, even though the law amendment failed to reach the three-fourths majority it needed, it's an overwhelming majority in the Southern Baptist Convention that wanted that to pass. And so I don't know if people happen to see me on John Harris. I recorded with John an hour after the law amendment failed, and I was pretty black-pilled. Cooler heads and a little bit more time have made me think that maybe I should come back from the brink a little bit. I'm kind of a radical when it comes to the SBC, so you should probably listen to Michael for a little bit more sane of a take.
I mean, you said you were the one keeping your church in the SBC. Is that still the case as far as people coming up to you and trying to abandon ship?
Well, we haven't had a members meeting since the SBC. We'll have one soon, and we talk about those things at members meetings. So we'll see. Yeah, I think this is a dynamic that's part of where my negativity is coming from. The more conservatives participate in the SBC, the more that they see what's going on with our elites, the less willing they are to tolerate it. And so there's this weird sort of reverse snowball where they're like, man, I just don't have patience for this. We can do things differently, which is a dynamic that I think those of us who want to see the Southern Baptist Convention healthy and honoring Christ really have to start strategically accounting for. If we can't give hope to conservatives, they're going to find somewhere else to fellowship.
Michael?
Yeah, I'm not as black-pilled. I think Jeff has been around this for a long time, and so I've been in the SBC for 20 years, but I've just kind of stayed on the periphery and haven't really been involved, and so I don't have as much of the just continual heartbreak, I guess, to contend with. So I could just share my experience. This was the first time I was really involved in going to the convention, being in the business, dealing with all of those things, and I learned a lot. I mean, it was a really eye-opening experience. But two stories I think that may pull some people back from the brink. There was another guy with me that was also, so he was not a messenger, but he is a Southern Baptist pastor, and he just didn't get his stuff and submitted in time to be able to be a messenger, but he was still there. And this guy he's solid conservative based as anybody, but he's just a faithful pastor, and he's not really he's not really a political guy. So he was there and he had no idea of what was going on. I mean, he was just watching. He didn't need anybody to tell him. Just watching things transpire. He was kind of radicalized, I think. So his first reaction was, all right, what we need to be more involved. We need to get our giving in order at our church. We need to have messengers. We need to prioritize this. So he's fired up. And then that's one story. The other story is I had 3 of my elders there. We have 4 elders and 3 of us were there. And we had one elder meeting right after that. And that was the first time that really put it all together. And all of us were like, okay, where do we need to reallocate giving to where we can have more money available to send it to the IMB, something like that, send it directly to, an entity that we feel like is doing good work, and to maximize our messengers so that we can get down to Dallas and mobilize, strategize, talk to other guys. That sounded like a rap. I didn't mean to be Owen Stray in there, but but just to mobilize and just have a bunch of guys ready to go to Dallas and be ready to make some noise. And so I think the trick is a lot of people haven't been paying attention because they haven't felt the need to. And whenever you hear, oh, there's problems in the SBC, at least for me, I tend to dismiss things like that because you have concerned guys that are always concerned about something. Somebody's always liberal. There's always somebody who's unfaithful. And I'm just like, yeah, it's a day that ends in Y that you think somebody's unfaithful. So why should I care about the thing you care about? But you have to be there and you have to see what's going on and really observe the behind the scenes things. If enough of those people can be appealed to and reasoned with, I think a lot of guys will be like, hey, I've got to be involved in this. So that's my impression coming back is more fired up, more energized, more ready to recruit and get more guys involved. And I get it. I mean, Jeff, you've seen a lot of drama, and I think you've been a faithful warrior for a long time, and it's guys like you that kind of helped open my eyes to things that were happening. So
just a quick follow up on your question. Where's your church located exactly?
Cincinnati, Ohio.
Cincinnati, Ohio. Okay. Yeah, I just forgot that for a moment. I'm like, but you seem to have more of a Southern accent going on. Is that true? Did I detect that?
I'm from Huntington, West Virginia.
Okay.
So,
I don't know.
I haven't had anybody tell me that for a while, but
I wasn't sure. So I'm like, huh. You're all fired up to go to Dallas. And I'm like, you're not from there, are you? Okay. No. But anyway, I wanted to do a quick little screen share. Apparently I was featured recently on the Steve Deace show. So I wanted to kind of get this clip shared. This is a buy, sell, or hold submission that I got on the air. So I want you all to respond to this.
Evangelical Dark Web is who will start us out, who says the Southern Baptist Convention will openly embrace female pastors within 10 years. Currently, they have 1,800 plus female pastors, and many of their leaders support and or go to churches with female pastors.
100% buy, barring awakening level revival or men like Adrian Rogers and others who were willing back in the 70s and early 80s to purge the denomination of these kinds of elements emerging again. That's inevitable. Okay, bye.
So 2 buys, a bit of a humble brag there, but let's get back to. So I'm going to let you all respond to that. Anthony, I guess your first take on that one.
I mean, I'm inclined to agree, especially since we go through the numbers and you actually probably have more female pastors in function and office now than you probably did back in the day when they had to first do the resurgence.
I thought it was like 18 when
it wasn't like 100. I thought it was 100 and now it's like 1,800. And then you have
No, I meant like in the original conservative resurgence. Wasn't like 18 pastors were women? It was
it's ridiculously
dramatically lower,
and we're at 100 times higher, and that's maybe not even including everyone that is like minister, director, and then we have to realize that the fact that the SBC is training a lot of these people at their seminaries. And Lincoln Duncan set off the internet with his celebration of women seminarians this week, and I'm assuming all of us have seen that. And again, that's feeding into the problem, because when the SBC booted 4 churches in 2023, several of those people were SBC seminary trained, including Fern Creek.
Jeff, are you buying or selling or?
Man,
Yeah.
I mean, you've identified where the train goes. So we're like 3 stops down the road where the train always goes historically. You know, there's part of me that says 10 years is too long a time frame. If
Well, within.
our SBC, yeah, okay, fair point. But if our SBC elites don't get the kind of pushback that Michael's talking about, involving fresh blood, people who are committed to putting the brakes on this thing and reversing course, it won't take 10 years. Those numbers that you just cited may be higher. There's sort of a rumor going around that one of the things the North American Mission Board has done is to tell ethnic churches with female pastors, hey, look, come on in. Don't sweat it. You know, it won't ever be a problem for you. And I'm not sure that we have all those on the record just yet about how they're filling out their staff. And clearly that's what elites want. I think there's a lot of motivations there.
The 1800 number comes from Mike Law. So he's the one who came up with that and did like the exhaustive search. So I don't know. I'm pretty sure that's a low ball number, especially when you got, let's just kind of name some elites that are going, you know, because the second part of that was many of their leaders also supported it. I mean, you know, Jeff York opposed the Mike Law amendment. 3 out of the 6 presidential candidates opposed the Mike Law amendment. The Jonathan Howe, right, is the guy who runs Baptist Press. His wife is a female pastor, and his church is a gay-affirming CBF church. I'm just going to assume if you're a part of the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, you're gay-affirming, because that organization's incredibly gay-affirming. So, you know, guilt by association or guilt by yoking yourself to that. So, and then Brent Leatherwood, his church has female pastors in function, not necessarily in title. So a lot of the elites are doing this, and you know, very little's been done about it at this time. There's not been a whole lot of calling that out. I mean, I knew Brent Leatherwood's church had female pastors last year. I just didn't know it was his church. So I was like, oh man, if I had known that was his church, would I have been running with that a long time ago? Mike, where are you at on the proposition?
A lot of people don't know the things that you just mentioned. They don't know who the players are and what's the backstory. They assume that the system is working, and you might have a bad apple here and there, but they think overall the system is working. And you know, Southern Baptists pride themselves on calling themselves conservative, and so nobody is going to. Not nobody, but few people are going to openly say, it's like, oh, I'm totally liberal. Or, you know, it's like people want to cash in on the credibility that you have in the SBC of calling yourselves conservative. And so people just don't know. As far as would I buy or sell on that 10-year projection, I mean, I'm not good at calling that kind of thing, but I'm good at reading trend lines. I'm good at reading trajectories. And as Jeff said, it's like we are 3 stops down this train, down these tracks, and we know where the tracks are leading, because it's not as though we're just in this static position. We are moving. And if this is a growing number, if you can demonstrate that the number of female pastors is growing over time, then simple sunk cost bias will keep us going in that direction. Because once you, like, inevitably, if you say, okay, you know, and this happened with the law amendment. Some people were arguing, if we pass the law amendment, then we already have these churches with women pastors in it. So what about them? Are we going to kick them out, or are they going to be out of a job? What's going to happen with those? And that's not biblical reasoning. That's sunk cost bias reasoning. It's like we're already invested this much in this way of operating. So it's too painful to turn back now. And so the longer we stay on this course, the more painful it will be to turn back. And so it's do we have the will? Do we have the nerve to push back? And maybe I'm naive about this, but I don't think that what we saw in terms of voting represents a good cross section of what people think about women pastors. I think it is there's a lot of political maneuvering and argumentation that seemed like we don't need the law amendment, and of course the scheduling of the votes of FBC Alexandria was very masterful, because if people sitting in the room could say, well, we just disfellowshipped the church for having women pastors, so why do we need a law amendment? And so people voted. I think a lot of people voted on that basis, and they don't really see. Most people don't really think the way I think a lot of guys like us do. We look at where things are headed, and because of that, we're sounding the alarm. And a lot of people just don't want to see. They don't want to recognize there's a problem until it's too late. What I say it's going to happen in 10 years, I don't know. It's a coin flip. I could see it going either way, but I wouldn't make a prediction.
So Steve Dace mentioned that, this is where it's headed unless we have like an Adrian Rogers like figure. Now, just to kind of name like the people of the first conservative resurgence, Paul Pressler, who recently died. I don't really know his background, and I don't know how substantiated the allegations against him are. I hear people who are good people on both sides of that issue. Adrian Rogers, as mentioned, and then Paige Patterson would be the other one who got, they ousted him because he didn't believe all women hard enough. And that's like the actual reason, because he reported an incident to the police and then didn't believe her afterwards hard enough. So, that was insensitive, I guess. So those three people aside, Adrian Rogers, I don't know about the other two, but he was a televangelist as far as I remember. He was on the radio, maybe television, but he was a famous pastor in the country at the time. So he had the leadership, potential and gravitas and infrastructure to kind of rally people and pastors to his cause. What I see nowadays is that we don't really have that. I mean, Tom Askell might be the largest pastor in the movement. Maybe I'm wrong about that. People like Robert Jeffress, I don't think would be. Someone threw his name around during one of the videos that I did. Robert Jeffress, I'm like that. I think running him would be a disaster, and I think he's too busy, shilling vaccines to really be strong on this issue in the Southern Baptist Convention, and he hasn't proven to care at all, as far as I know. So we don't really have a modern Adrian Rogers, in part because very influential churches are very democratized. Like, it's not like there's only a few radio stations and a few radio pastors on them. Anyone can start a ministry on YouTube or radio, or even. So I'm not sure if we can even get to that pathway to saving the SBC. I don't think we can recreate the first conservative resurgence via, we don't have an Adrian Rogers type figure. Do you think I'm wrong? I'll go with. Okay.
So, I mean, a lot of what you said there is right. Now, Adrian was a local church pastor. Bellevue Baptist is a historic church in the Memphis area. There was a notable pastor named R.G. Lee who preceded Adrian. If you drive by Bellevue, which unfortunately is now pastored by one of the betrayers in the SBC, but if you drive by, the joke is at Six Flags Over Jesus, huge church, and he was a singular figure, very gifted preacher, easy to like. He's got one of the best preaching voices in history. But when the conservative resurgence started, he was actually an outsider. The pastors' conference was started by conservatives to try to give people like Adrian a platform so that he could speak to pastors and start rallying the movement. And so we don't have, thus far, an Adrian Rogers. The thing I would say, though, with the personalities you mentioned is I think Paige Patterson may be even more important, because what Paige was willing to do is strategize with an aim to win. And he was going to win, basically in any way that didn't involve sin. And really, one of the things that hamstrings conservatives now is that it feels mean, too aggressive to try to do what it takes to actually win, to have the will to overcome. And so
that 11th commandment.
Yeah, the 11th commandment, which is a leftover from the first conservative resurgence. They would not criticize fellow conservatives no matter what. It's now kind of metastasized and become a problem for us. So we need political will. We need political strategists, but we need political will. And Michael got into some of this. So while we don't have the singular figure of an Adrian Rogers, we do have people who are willing to say, I'm going to do the hard work to try to win. And as you mentioned, we don't have the institutional control, but they didn't have social media. And if you want to find people who are willing to believe there are problems in the Southern Baptist Convention, you can find them on social media. You can find them on programs like yours. And so we can't run the playbook back, but there are certain lessons that we can learn from them. And I do think we have some advantages, even as we look and say, well, there are disadvantages we can't replicate into strengths now. The toolbox isn't empty, I guess that's what I'm going to say. And in terms of finding good preachers, we really do have a lot of really good preachers. I mean, you've got Michael Clary on here. Michael's a really good preacher. And he's the kind that not only is a good communicator, but more importantly, he's faithful to the text, and he's got a spine. He wants to honor Christ. And so I do think, maybe not with an Adrian Rogers, but with 100 guys who are some portion of Adrian Rogers, we can do some of those things.
Michael, if you want to jump in on that.
I'll tell you my impression. I think we got organized for this year. There's a lot of people that care and have cared for a long time, but the level of organization that I saw going into this convention was impressive, but it needed to happen sooner. So I think there's good momentum, but some of take for example, Center for Baptist Leadership, which was that was left a massive dent in the convention. A major player like the Megan Basham, where she spoke at the luncheon that we did, the partnership that they've established with founders. William Wolf in November was telling me about this project he was working on, and it didn't exist in November, and it just got it off the ground, in mid-spring. So there was 2 or 3 months really of getting just things moving. But we're in a different time than the last conservative resurgence. So I think like it's a democratization of everybody's voices. 30 years ago, you could have a few voices that rise above, that have massive platforms, radio programs. They're famous. Everybody knows them because fame was more of a rarity. But now everybody's famous in a way. You can know lots and lots of famous people, and everybody's getting their 15 minutes of fame. And we are able to mobilize more quickly. We can mobilize from the floor with different chat groups and message threads and so forth. You can have people like, okay, here's what we need to do. Here's how we're going to respond to this. I mean, we have technical advantages that we could use. And my observation in the room, I mean, it was really eye-opening because I thought we won the argument going into the convention on the law amendment. We won the argument. Nobody had raised a serious objection to the law amendment that was not soundly answered and rebutted. But winning the argument prior to convention only matters to those that are paying attention prior to convention. And so many other people at the convention, they had not thought of it before. I remember asking a few guys right after the law amendment. I was thinking everybody showed up already knowing how they were going to vote. And some of the guys I talked to said, no. A lot of people probably were making up their minds just in the moment about whether or not to raise their hand or what to put on the ballot. So I think
now I want to pause right there because they only had one guy already argue against the law amendment, right? I thought he did a terrible job, but I don't know. Maybe I didn't think he was very convincing.
It doesn't matter. It's not about who speaks from the floor. It's about the strategy from the platform. it's like a story, a narrative. You've got Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and they're telling a story just in how they introduce business and how different votes are handled. So to give you an example, there were a couple of votes prior to the law amendment where Bart Barber, and I'm not saying anything about his motives, I don't know his motives, but it was a raised ballot, and I'm looking around the room and I'm thinking the nays have it. And he says, okay, the yays have it. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. That ain't at all what I'm seeing. I'm looking around and I'm like, clearly you've got this wrong. But it didn't matter. There was a second vote, and I can't remember the issue. And it was the same way. The way I read the room was different than what he announced. So then we get to the law amendment, and he says, okay, we're going to do this by paper ballot. And so I'm thinking initially that's a good thing because nobody's going to be able to just sort of kind of guess from the platform at the moment, when in reality that gave everybody the anonymity to be able to not have the accountability of the other messengers that are from their church or that are sitting around them looking over and said, you just voted against the law amendment, I saw your hand up. I think things like that, they told a story and set up different votes, and whether they did it intentionally I can't say, but man, it sure looked to me like it was a masterful job of putting business in at certain moments that would maximize the result they wanted. One other final example, if everybody's hungry at lunchtime, they don't want to hear a long debate on something that they don't understand very well. And so you're going to schedule business that you want to kind of get in and get out quickly about 11:30 or 11:15 because your people are hungry and they're getting fidgety.
Yeah, and I noticed that they brought that out at exactly that time too.
Yeah. So the point being, it's like it doesn't matter what you can say on the floor. The platform has the biggest microphone, and they can craft whatever narrative they want. And so we have to have an answer for that. And I think we can answer that, but it's not going to be easy because we don't have that bully pulpit. And so that means that our ground game has to be much more organized and detailed. And I mean, we need to have, signal groups or whatever with hundreds and hundreds of people in it, if not thousands of people that can be communicated with in real time so they can be given some sort of, here's how you should interpret what you're seeing right now, and then get that information out, because otherwise we're going to be subject to however they manipulate the platform.
So Anthony noted that, Bart Barber was a little bit Angel Hernandez calling balls and strikes from the platform, which should especially sting Bart because he's a baseball fan.
That's a great analogy. I love it.
And you're saying it was by design. That's even more conspiracy.
Yeah, you went into kind of conspiracy mode, because I noted the same thing also about how the order of business is meant to get people to buy into the program. That's why you have the International Mission Board sendees on the first day, which really that should be the last thing that you do. We've done all this business. Now we're sending missionaries united as a convention. That should be the last order of business, in my opinion.
It used to be later in the program. It used to be.
Yeah.
They realized the rhetorical power of it. Right.
So,
and I just want to be clear. I'm not accusing anybody. I'm just saying that it is a strategic advantage to be able to control the platform.
Right. And we noticed how, it doesn't matter how in order you are, things can get ruled out of order. David Morrill was an example of that, where he copied text from a motion that was ruled in order in 2021. They'd ruled it out of order. Now, in Bart Barber's defense, he wasn't president then, but imagine a lot of the people on the Order of Business Committee were still around then, because it's a rotating cycle, as far to my knowledge. So, it's shady all around, and the game is rigged, man. So I want to catch up on some chat real quick. Marshall says Paul Pressel was actually the strategist behind the CR. He was a lawyer who had grown up going to the Democrat National Convention meetings. To be honest, I'm not a biographer on the people in the conservative.
Yeah, I've never heard of them until.
So I was stretching my knowledge this week.
I can round out a little bit of that, Anthony. Okay. So famously, Pressler and Paige Patterson went to Cafe Du Monde in New Orleans and wrote out a plan to take back the Southern Baptist Convention on a paper napkin. And I wouldn't diminish Page's role over and against Pressler's, but certainly Pressler was an important strategist in that. And in some ways, it's encouraging. Two men figured out how to do it, and they went and got it done. It gives you some hope for sort of a ground game, grassroots level approach to retaking the Southern Baptist Convention.
Conceptual Clarity says the biggest category of preachers other than charismatics is Southern Baptists, and aside from James Merritt and Steve Gaines, most of them seem to be conservative. So people like David Jeremiah is technically a Southern Baptist. I'm trying to think of who else would. Isn't like Preston Wood also, and Jack Young. So there's a lot of
Jeremiah,
Robert Jeffress
Johnston,
and Ed Young, right, who just retired, and like a lot of TV pastors that aren't charismatic are actually Southern Baptists. But yeah, they haven't really weighed in on the issues favorably. Or Tony Evans, who's probably on the wrong side of these issues, to be honest, because he has like both of his daughters functioning as female pastors. One of them's in prosperity gospel land, but that's a topic we've talked about somewhere else, sometime else. Let's see. Robert Jeffress would not be a good choice. I agree. Let's see. Marshall again says you have to bring the votes, register at the last minute so that NAM doesn't know how many votes to bring. Now,
I disagree.
know what the last minute
if they're going
is.
to have, let's say, 3,000 people come, and they're just going to do that every year, then that's a stable number. So I think their number is probably a lot more stable than, I guess, everyone else. Like they're guaranteed, let's say, 20% of the attendance.
So Dane asks, how do lay guys that want reformation in our churches and in the convention make a difference? So I'll let the pastors answer this one.
Yeah, Mike, if you don't care, I'm going to go first on that. So, Dane, we need you. We need you. And listen, if you're looking at the PCA General Assembly that just took place, the PCA conservatives have been making major gains the last couple of years. If you're paying attention to them, it looked like Revoice was going to just bully that denomination left, but it hasn't happened. And the reason that it hasn't happened is that the teaching elders, who are not they're not the products of the seminary system, they're not financially motivated by career incentives to kind of go along with the infrastructure, have showed up in mass to the PCA, and they have exerted their will against the fashionable narratives within that denomination. What's the equivalent for us? Well, it's people like Dane. It's people like Dane who have to make a sacrifice to take off work, sometimes unpaid leave, to go to the Southern Baptist Convention and pay to eat out and pay to be in a hotel. So, Dane, we need you. And what I want to say to you is, one, brother, I don't know your pastor, but if your pastor doesn't see a problem in the SBC, you should make that a problem for him. And I'm a pastor. I don't want anybody, stirring up dissension in local churches. But if you see it as Baptists, the local church leads. And so your pastor needs to be brought to your perspective. You need to be pushing within your church for y'all to take up love offerings or do whatever is necessary to send your messengers. Your pastor should know that there's an expectation that he attends, and there's an expectation of how he's going to vote on critical issues. And anybody you know who's in a Southern Baptist church is a layman that you can sort of inform, red pill, whatever term you want to use. Please see that as a calling before God to fight for the health of the denomination. I mean, lay guys are our teaching elders, by and large, informed lay guys who know what's going on. And their pastors can't be comfortable with the status quo because they know there's going to be a lack of comfortable status quo at their local church level if they are. I won't keep monopolizing the mic here, but it's hard for me to communicate how corrupt North American Mission Board dollars are. They're constantly flying local pastors out for sweet retreats. They're signing them up for financial stipends as ambassadors for the North American Mission Board.
Or what about the leadership conferences?
Right, leadership development kind of stuff. It's a grooming mechanism. And so until pastors realize, okay, I'm happy for the sweet North American Mission Board gifts, But good night. It's going to cost me week in and week out with the people who I live with, who I serve with. It's not gonna overcome the North American Mission Board influence. So please make this an issue in your church. Make it a part of your members' meetings, your business meetings. Ask for updates on the SBC. Your pastors need to know that this is something their people care about. We really need that.
Michael, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, yes and amen to what Jeff said. I think, practically you have some churches that have, I saw Forge and Anvil, Connor, I guess that was Connor, that, so he was at the convention. He said that his church sent 3 out of their 12 that they were eligible for. So you have some churches that are eligible for more messengers and don't send them all. That's one issue. Another issue is you have churches that that have the capacity to get more messengers, and they just need to commit financially to giving at a level that will get them more messengers. And then I've also heard of some churches, and I don't know how different churches handle this, but like they're sending kind of a mixed group of messengers. So if you have 12 messengers, you might have a handful that are pro-law amendment, a few that are anti-law amendment. And so they're canceling out each other's votes. I think that like churches need to, basically churches like ours need to maximize our messengers, send our maximum amount of messengers, and make sure that all the messengers that we send are informed about what's going on so that they can vote appropriately, and even have some communication, during the convention, so that way they can just kind of stay up to date on what's happening from the platform if they don't understand all the issues at stake. Because there were a lot of things that kind of went over my head. And so I imagine a lot of people may have felt the same way. I'm just like, I don't know the right way to vote here because I can't really tell what's going on. So just, I think, it's a numbers game with messengers. It all comes down to that. It's a numbers game.
Yeah. So people going in without marching orders, which were a mandate from their own church, would be sufficient.
But I mean, even still, you said Forge and Anvil their church had 3 of their 12. But even still, how much money is that to send 3 messengers, depending on how far across the country? Because again, I just did a road trip to Tennessee, so I know what the cost of like Airbnb is, what the cost of hotel is, and yeah, you could easily be somewhere between $500 and $1,000 per messenger. I mean, maybe it scales if you're driving, so it's a carpool. But if you're flying, I mean, that plane tickets add up. Obviously, hotels aren't cheap. Food. So, I mean, there's our costs that run upward. I mean, you could be upwards of $10,000 to send 12 messengers, depending on how far you're going.
That's right. And that's why North American Mission Board flying people in is such a tremendous strategic advantage. But I'll just say this, it's not going to happen without cost. It's not going to happen without real skin in the game. So if you go back to the original conservative resurgence, they were running buses, like tour buses, going through small towns, picking up a lot of people and taking them to the convention. You would have conventions of, particularly in Texas, 20,000 people who are there at the annual meeting because lay people realized the significance of the SBC and that it had an impact for the kingdom that was important. And here again, an educated laity, an educated conservative pastor body is what we have to have. And this is why I'm saying, at the local church level, you can say this is a matter of stewardship. We send a ton of money to the SBC. Why aren't we sending a ton of people to oversee how it's being spent and being active and having a voice in the congregation? Those are the kind of things that pastors, elder boards need to be hearing from their people. And again, as has already been said, being sent with a mandate. We have an expectation of what you're going to do on these issues. And as a matter of accountability, when you get back, we want to hear you report how you acted in these critical decisions. You can split an Airbnb, you can split gas to the convention. You need to be wise as serpents and figure out how to make use of scarce resources. Otherwise, the North American Mission Board, with its huge cachet, is just going to keep buying the SBC that it wants.
I'm going to weigh in on Bree and Babe's podcast. Do you guys honestly believe an open ballot would have passed a law amendment? The consensus, and object if you disagree, but it seems to be that Bart Barber would have called it Angel Hernandez on the plate, strike down the middle, no strike call. Seems like that was a large possibility, which is why, people were hoping for a uh, not a hand ballot, a paper ballot on this issue. So you guys disagree with that? Because
Not now.
just
I
trying to
was
catch
like
up on
Michael.
chat.
Yeah, I was just where Michael was. I thought, oh, well, great. A paper ballot's going to document this overwhelming consensus we have that's reflected in their previous annual meeting. What it turned out to be was weak men could secretly vote against what they say their public convictions are.
Right. So I want to posit my idea for saving the Southern Baptist Convention, because I think it kind of involves a little bit more pain. And to me, I think a lot of these churches need to divest from the Southern Baptist Convention, and I think it's time to create a competing entity. And the play here, we've seen similar things in politics. So, for instance, the NRA, the National Rifles Association, is not the best on the issue of guns, but they're not as bad as they could be, because there's like Gun Owners of America and there's other firearm rights groups that basically keep the NRA in check and from being as bad as they could be. And the play here would be to create a parallel institution that competes with the Southern Baptist Convention for dollars and stuff like and resources and stuff like that. But because it's like this emerging competitor, it keeps them in check, and it keeps their liberalism more in check, because it threatens their bottom line if they keep going more openly liberal. So I think that this is the strategy to save the Southern Baptist Convention. In my upcoming book, Winning Not Winsome, I have a chapter called Divest and Build, which this is one application of that, which I don't write in the book, but I do write about the cooperative program and how I think giving more money to the Southern Baptist Convention is giving more money to the people that are trying to pay messengers to vote their way when they get there. So it's like, giving more money to North American Mission Board gives Kevin Ezell more power to do what he wants with the convention. And I've called Kevin Ezell the Phantom Menace. He is the Phantom Menace of the convention. So that's my like big picture of how to save the SBC. I'm kind of like your feedback on that, since I'll let Anthony go first, since this is a relatively new idea.
I mean, I thought I proposed something like that last week, because there's no mutual exclusivity on the XBC. Like, you had one guy ask about how you could be a member, or whether like a church in NAM could sponsor a church plant in Texas with the General Baptist, basically the moderate and the progressive, or the liberal and the progressive Baptist. And it's like they already do cooperation with those two entities. So, I mean, there's no restrictions on you can only be SBC, you can't be another Baptist association. And most Baptist churches probably are multiple associations because of the local level. So there's no restrictions. And that would allow you to build up a competing entity. And if it is expressly right wing, per conquest law, then, the left won't.
Okay. Jeff, your feedback? You got Credo Alliance going on, so I can't think you're that hostile to the idea.
No, actually, I mean, I've got kind of a lengthy answer there, just because I think about this stuff 365 days a year, and I have been for decade plus at this point.
That's one day off this year.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe I'll find a way to take that day off. So I think it's hard for a lot of people. Once you go to the SBC, you see it. The cooperative program is the greatest mission sending mechanism in church history. And to try and rebuild something like it would not happen in my great-great-grandchildren's lifetimes. It was built in a world that was positive towards Christianity. It's accumulated resources that are just virtually impossible to conceive of, even God's providential blessing being recreated. So they do have to be fought for. But to your point about funding, you're right. We can't keep sending Kevin Ezell money to try to fight Kevin Ezell. So something Michael was talking about earlier is strategic giving. So one of the things we can do as Southern Baptists is designate our giving. We don't want to send any money to the ERLC. We don't want to send any money to the North American Mission Board. Now, the North American Mission Board, because of their real estate ventures, won't feel that. The ERLC will feel that. That has to happen. And so what you have to do is sort of thread this needle and say, I'm going to give the precise dollar amount, which your state convention is obligated to tell you and help you through the process of doing, if you give them a call, the precise amount that will allow you to maximize your messengers, how to designate that away from the most corrupt institutions. That has to happen. That has to be part of the way we do it. And you're also right about parallel institutions. Now, this is one of those situations where conservatives have some real resources there. Founders Ministries has been doing this for a long time. Their Institute of Public Theology is offering a meaningful theological educational alternative to Southern Baptist seminaries. They have church networks. It's possible to cooperate with other groups like ABWE to send missions, to send missionaries to foreign lands, or even the International Mission Board, if you didn't, for instance, like their COVID vaccine policy, which I did not like their policy. These things exist, and we can make use of them. Credo Alliance, thank you for mentioning it. Our hope is Baptist renewal and sort of preparing for the Baptist future. We're going to keep a foot in the Southern Baptist Convention, but we're doing things that are broader. One, because more needs to be done than what the Southern Baptist Convention is doing. Things like Christian education. We want to help Baptists do that better. But we're going to keep a footprint in the SBC because we know that it is worth fighting for. So what you're outlining there is very important. It's very viable. I would just wed it to Michael's, and Michael, I'll yield my time here as soon as I get done. I'm sorry to soapbox on this, but we've got to do those. We've got to do those things.
Joel Evan's been taking a lot of heat lately for having guests on his podcast and being the one who monopolizes speaking time. Yeah. I'm really trying to do the opposite here. So.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I don't want to take the opportunity. But like I said, I think about this so much. We've got to do it strategically the way you're talking about. We've got to do it with outside pressure. And we've got to do it also with an eye to actually winning the Southern Baptist Convention. We've got resources to do that. But again, this is where it's going to take actual informed activism, as Michael's talking about already. So I think it's possible to walk this route. I think we've already got really, particularly with Founders, Center for Baptist Leadership is up and coming, Credo Alliance as well. We've got some of those resources on the table. People are going to have to be wise about how they use them. Michael, would you like to talk now? I'm sorry.
No, dude, every time you say you're soapboxing, I'm like, man, you talked about half as long as I did. So I love hearing the things you have to say, Jeff. So I consider me a skeptic with the plan that you presented, and the thing is that it's like taking on Goliath. So it would be a miraculous thing to try to build something, as Jeff said, that could compete with the SBC. The SBC is massive. I mean, it is huge. And we would. It would just. I think a lot of SBC Acts 29. Similarly, you have mega churches that really exert an outsized influence. And so it would be, you'd have to have a lot of guys, a lot of churches that are probably small, mid-sized churches to exit in huge numbers for anybody to even notice. I don't think it would make that much of a difference. My fear for leaving the SBC is it reminds me of when we pulled out of Afghanistan and we left all of our tanks and our guns for the Taliban. Now, somebody's going to say,
that's the opposite of how you withdraw conflict, by the way.
Right. Well, somebody's going to say, well, Clary is accusing the SBC entity heads of being the Taliban or something. But still, it's like you've got all these resources.
Pentagon, they're dumber.
But think about it, you've got resources and I mean, I was like, there's so much power and history and heritage and legacy that the Southern Baptist Convention represents. And so if we exit en masse, they won't miss us. And then it's kind of like, okay, we've just exited Afghanistan and now the worst actors in the SBC now have greater control, greater power, and they can consolidate their power. So it's like the Taliban taking our guns. And then the SBC will become our worst nightmare, because all of that power and history and credibility, because the credibility that it has is because of its conservative past. But then people will see it as conservative, but it will become this nightmare scenario where the conservative convention is now going to be doing things that would shock all of us. And that is possible. And I think, let me say it this way. I think it is a noble calling. Somebody said this, I can't remember who it was. And it kind of made me feel sad when they said it, but I know what they mean. What if our calling is, I would be willing to stay in the SBC and lose for the rest of my life if it meant slowing down the rate of decline. Is that saying it right? Slowing down the rate of decline. Basically, it's like if it is to be a thorn in the side of those who want to take it in a liberal direction and just be that voice of reason, a prophetic voice, a voice of warning, that's a noble calling. Now, I'm not saying that's the only strategy. I want to win, and I think we can win. I think victory is within our grasp. But that said, I think that even if it is not God's will for us to win, then better to stay in and make their victory miserable. That's a noble thing to do, and I'm here for it.
So let me just give an overall response to both of you, because first, I'm not saying you have to exit the SBC to do this plan, because the Southern Baptist Church is autonomous. They can actually still be a Southern Baptist Church, send messengers to be an annoyance to the platform, and do what I just said. But in terms of strategic giving, I wasn't really aware of an IMB competitor that you mentioned. I think, Jeff, you mentioned one of them. So I wasn't even aware that there was a sizable competitor.
I mean, they do take Samaritan's Purse as a competitor.
Apparently with Sin Relief. Now, it'd be nice to have a competitor to both of those institutions, since they, basically facilitate the invasion at our southern border. But overall, International Mission Board seems like it's the least corrupt SBC institution, and that would be a good resource for strategic giving that I think probably also advances the kingdom. However, the seminaries, less, the ERLC actively works against us, and the North American Mission Board, I think, is a vastly ineffective use of money. It's focused not on planting Southern Baptist churches, but planting churches on top of churches. And I think we should, you would create a parallel institution that directly competes with the corrupt institutions of the SBC. And that way the giving, and I think a lot of the pieces are actually already on the board. They just have to be aligned and then connected and threaded together. So the Center for Baptist Leadership is an emerging competitor to the ERLC. And I think we should have a direct competitor to the North American Mission Board that's slightly different, a little less focused on church planting. And probably, Jeff talked about this, when he came on prior to the SBC, programs to help churches, existing churches that, might be in more economically depressed areas, because there's your missionary on the field right there. But, so we need to have an active movement on helping evangelize our own country through helping out churches that are already existent, and also expanding homeschooling within church context. I think there's some things that there's some needs that are identified in the mission field that, Southern Baptist, the cooperative program hasn't recognized, but a lot of Southern Baptist churches would be interested in. But the institution we would create would be a fund of funds, so to speak, that we could create a program that distributes money to the various ministries that are already in existence. So
and
that's sort of my idea.
And let me just add, let's say you start off with $3 million now in year one, and then you expand to $30 million by year 10. Okay, so you've grown 10 times, and you've started this institution, a $30 million fund that is distributing money, as Ray just described. In 10 years, you could do more on a parallel level than you probably could in retaking the Southern Baptist Convention, because if we're looking at a timeline Clint Presley's going to win re-election next year, so you need at least 8 years after that, which means 9 years total, to do a resurgence. And the question is that possible? And I would say you actually have to double your support as it currently is to go from 31% to at least, let's say, closer to 60%, or really 2,500 messengers. You got to get near 5,000 messengers. And it's probably easier to begin a parallel path and and again, compete on church revitalization, homeschooling, and issues that are explicitly major concerns for people that are especially conservative.
So
Well,
I'll let you all
again,
respond. So
yeah, again,
since that was
I mean, I'm
lengthy.
sympathetic. I'm sympathetic to a lot of this, and again, Credo Alliance is self-consciously trying to grow into some of those things. The thing that I would kind of bolster Michael's argument with, and Michael, I think I know the guy who was giving you the depressing long defeat talk that you're referencing there. We know how this plays out by looking at Princeton. So Machen had to leave Princeton. I don't fault Machen for leaving Princeton, but Machen and old Princeton left and started Westminster. Princeton, left unchecked, has become one of the major, theological, ethical, ideological sewers, pumping filth into our culture. Basically, within a couple of years of the departure of Machen, what do? They went and founded Westminster, and Westminster was very successful as an endeavor, not comparable in scope and influence to Princeton, though. Now Westminster has jumped on the woke train full stop. So the parallel institution building is part of what the game plan has to be. But anything that involves, and Ray, I know this is not what you're calling for, but we really have to check the idea that conservatives can just hop out and build something parallel. It's never going to reach the scope of what the Southern Baptist Convention is, not in my lifetime, not in my great-grandkids' lifetimes. We have to fight for it. We can't turn 6 SBC seminaries into 6 Princetons. There has to be a check on those things. And conservatives have to have a strategy to say, yes, we're going to build parallel institutions. We're going to fill the gaps the SBC is not doing. We're going to give hope to those who don't have any hope in what the SBC is funding. But we have to be dogged in sticking with the SBC. I want to be able to say, when I face Christ in judgment, I did everything I could to stop that from becoming a terror that will haunt my family line for generations. I want to love those future neighbors. So look to Princeton, look to Westminster, and look to what happened to them to see how important these things are.
Right, and what I was saying was this is how we save the SBC, because my plan is not to replace the SBC or abandon the SBC. Right. This is my play to save it, because you stay in, you do the strategic giving, you be a thorn in their side and a nuisance, and make them kick you out, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Because I agree with that.
What Michael's talking about,
in principle,
that's my commitment. Yeah, I'm here until they run, and I think they're pretty soon. I probably will be brought up on a credentials issue. But I'm here to make them as miserable from within the room. I want them to feel like they're trapped in the room with me.
Is that a reference to Blake Callens?
I mean, yeah, but who cares about Blake? Blake's.
He didn't like you quoting the Pope.
Yeah, man. Blake is tormented by infernal entities. But there's other guys. There's guys who are actually more connected to the SBC. Jason Sampler has been rattling the saber about this. Griffin Gullidge raised an issue of whether or not you could challenge credentials from the floor at this annual meeting. I don't know that I was the one in view there, but I very well could have been the one in view. They don't want dissident voices, and so I've got a pretty strong incentive to be the dissident voice and make them have to take action. It'll at least show who they are.
I like this comment from Yellowmoth. Just don't follow Macon's mistake, and don't call yourself the Orthodox Baptist Church. Orthobros keep harassing the OPC or hassling the OPC. So, Michael, if you have a response to my response, are you muted?
No, I just say I don't have.
All right.
I don't have anything else to add.
Now, I'm always game to help SBC people strategize. And I think one thing that they do need to do is vastly improve their strategy. I mean, I think you need Mike Law on the platform at some point in time and get him to be like first or second VP and then groom him for the presidency. Because again, he has practically 100% name ID in the room because of an amendment that bears his name. So you might as well use that as your flagship. Everyone knows this guy. 60% of people voted for his amendment. So that means 60% of the room probably views him favorably. So you can probably get a 50% majority to get him on a platform and then get him as the president one day.
Now, last year, I advocated to run Al Mueller. This is before any of the candidates were announced, by the way. This is like my August. This was like, when we were having these conversations this time last year, this is my idea. Run Al Mueller in Indianapolis because Indianapolis is closer to Louisville. So that was like my big idea last year. Now, I don't know if I think he might have hit his ceiling for popularity a few years ago, but the dude did defeat a struggle session. So I don't know. Maybe he might still have it, and there'd be a seat at the table for the people who help get him elected because he's that much of a politicker, in my opinion. But this is the time to be having these conversations because we got all year to kind of do this, and maybe we'll talk presidential candidates later. One thing that I know was a bit of I know Jeff disagreed with. I know Jared disagreed with me on this, and because I said that Clint Presley would be a worse president than the guy Dan Spencer, who came in second place. Now, I probably wouldn't have voted for either one of them because I would have just no voted on that ballot issue. But just kind of get your reads on it. Who do you think would have been a worse? Because Jared was saying that at least Clint Presley supports the Mike Law amendment on paper. Now, again, I think I don't believe he's super genuine in that support, and then Dan Spencer's, my read on him is he's very pragmatic, or he's a, full-blown pragmatist, and maybe there's some negotiation with him. So, whereas Clint Presley would basically, he's, puppeted by Kevin Ezell from my read. So what exactly is your read on that discussion?
Michael, I'm suspicious we have similar mind on this, but I will be the less charitable voice. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, and then I'll speak after.
I am not as familiar with either of those. Dan Spencer kind of came out of nowhere. And my read on Clint Presley is that he checks a few of the boxes, but he is a company man, from what I've heard and seen. But that is a lot of conjecture from a distance. So I'd be hesitant to say much beyond that.
Well, I'm not quite as hesitant because I've been following it for a while. I love my buddy Jared. He has a real optimism about Clint that I don't particularly share, although he is the best of the candidates who weren't named Jared Moore and David Allen, because he at least feels an obligation to give lip service to things like the law amendment. So my read as an outsider, I don't have any inside baseball on this, but Clinton has been a longtime trustee at Southern Seminary. He's also a guy from North Carolina. So right now, the North Carolina and Texas alliance, that'd be Bart Barber, J.D. Greer, much more important in that scheme, Danny Aiken and Ezell are sort of this North Carolina-Texas alignment that's been directing the SBC. I think Clint Presley represents Moeller's attempt to say, let me use a North Carolina guy, but he's definitely under my influence, and to kind of pull some influence back his way. I would love for that to be true. That would be a win for us. As Michael said, I don't see a lot within Clinton himself, although I still have enough hope to try to remain optimistic about that. Now, related, and it's something I saw in the chat as well, the Dan Spencer matter, I think, is largely a product of conservatives who aren't friendly to Calvinists. And there was a comment in the chat earlier, kind of along this lines. Adrian Rogers was this wonderful guy, and guess what? He wasn't a Calvinist. So one of the things that I'm very interested in, have been working for years to do, is coalition building the way you're talking about. Cooperative, forgive me, CBN friends. The Conservative Baptist Network are people that I really appreciate and that I've tried to work with in the SBC. They are people that I used to fight as an SBC guy on the issue of Calvinism. They hate Calvinism. I like Calvinism. There's been some kind of saber rattling that they're going to check out on any kind of coalition that we form. I really don't want to see that happen, because what I would say is I'm a committed Calvinist. But Calvinism versus non-Calvinism, or however you want to frame it, is a Christian debate. Christianity versus critical race theory is a Christianity versus non-Christianity, anti-Christianity debate. So I have a real brotherhood with these guys who aren't Calvinists, and I would much rather have the fraternal argument with those guys than I would, fight them while I'm also fighting the woke people that we both know are a problem. And so, okay, if Calvinism is a problem, no, Tom Askell is not pushing Calvinism. Tom Askell is pushing a healthy SBC. Jeff Wright, William Wolfe, whoever you're going to identify on that front, we're not trying to make the SBC Calvinist. We're trying to see the SBC Christian and healthy.
Make Baptist Calvinist again. We're not going to put this.
Yeah, I mean, right now, again, I'm a committed Calvinist because I think it's what the Bible teaches. I would be quite happy to be in a non-Calvinist SBC the way I have been for most of my adult life, and make that as a minority argument within Christianity that SBC represents. I would prefer that infinitely to what we're having right now. And so if we're going to build coalitions, we've got to do some, I know theological triage is unfashionable, but some of my Southern Baptist brothers are going to have to go, guys, let's fight for the faith. And once we have that solidified, once we have a healthy SBC, then we can go back to trying to figure out what God's sovereignty means. And maybe because we knew each other from the more important battle, we can resolve those things in a more fraternal fashion on the far side.
It's interesting that you bring that up.
We've got to hang in
about the CBN, because they explicitly stated in their origin that they were here to bridge soteriological divides. They said that in their origin. They said that in their website, and then it's clear that they're taking dogmatic assertions on secondary issues. Like they went full dispensationalist in the past 6 months or 9 months at this point. So they went full dispensationalist over Israel. They so it's like, wow, you guys sure are taking some real stands that threaten any sort of unity. And it's like, okay, now they're anti-Calvinist now. I mean, Virgil Walker's still on there.
Well, I mean,
on there, like
historically, right. That their block is historically very anti-Calvinist, and we had some real wars over that with some of their guys. We got about Brad, Rod Martin. Rod. I don't know Rod's soteriology, but those are good brothers. And I really believe they do want to kind of link arms. I think some of their constituency is starting to say, well, we're not winning hand in hand with the Calvinists. But I would just say back to that, you're not winning with the non-Calvinists either, and we're better together than we are apart. And so let's hold the line until we can get back to having the argument we would all
on soteriology. There's no monopoly. Calvinists aren't all on the good side or the bad side, and the same isn't true for there are Arminians, or do they call themselves traditional, even though they're not. The original Southern Baptists were all Calvinists. Mm-hmm. I don't know, so I'm not sure they want to call themselves that.
Easy. I'm trying to hold the coalition here, man.
Saying.
no, make it Calvinist again. We're not going to start a movement. Get the hats.
Yeah, not right now. But that is not the high priority.
How do you think
that's not where we're
the guy who got up to the microphone and said, we need to investigate Calvinism and stuff like that? How do you think he voted on the Mike Law Amendment?
I'm going to try to be charitable to that brother and say he knows the Bible's clear on what the Bible's clear on, and I'm just going to believe the best about that brother.
I kind of am in the same boat, because I feel like he's a cantankerous old guy, so he's women preachers ain't having that, and he'd say it in like a hootin' tootin' accent. Michael, if you want to chime in on that while I field the next question.
I have no idea what that guy would have voted on the law amendment. He seemed like a sweet man. I like guys like that don't bother me at all. I mean, I'm like Jeff.
Bothered.
I'm a committed Calvinist, and I'm
That's
used to
always
being
funny.
the minority report in a lot of places that I'm in, and so guys like that don't bother me. And I just that's not the fight we're in right now. We're not in a fight of Calvinism and Arminianism. I'm content to put that on the back burner for a while, because we face existential threats from much more dangerous villains like wokeness and critical race theory and feminism and all of those things. I mean, these are much more serious arguments, and I think people don't see feminism in the same category. But I think feminism is every bit the threat that CRT is. It's a little more veiled, but it is a dangerous thing.
Yeah, I mean, I would rank the top 3 threats as the feminism. Female pastors would probably be the number 1 threat in the Southern Baptist Convention to me at the moment. I think the side B theology is somewhere 2 or 3. Maybe it's 3 for the Southern Baptist Convention, but it might be a 2 or a 1 even for like the PCA, give or take. And then critical race theory is still a major issue because the Southern Baptist Convention has never actually condemned it.
Well, they all are fruit of the same root. They're interconnected. They come from the same place.
I write that in my book. It's under the social justice gospel umbrella. It is 3 prongs. Maybe
it's a Venn diagram
merge, but
and the Venn diagram has more overlap than distinction.
I want to say I use the comparison of like Operation Barbarossa, where there's like 3 main thrusts for because I like military analogies. But anyway, yes, spoiler alert, yes. But buy the book when it comes out. Winning Not Winsome. It's going to be coming out this summer because, there's a 90-day countdown that started already. But it's been a while since I've heard things from the publishers, so they better... I'm going to have to call them up tomorrow and see what's going on because, hey...
Who's your publisher? Who's your publisher? We can tell them we're looking forward to it.
I'm working with the self-publishing service because it's a little too hot. I mean, honestly, it's like there's a lot of Christian publishers that I'm just now learning about, but like I want to say who people publishing like your book, and because the way I looked about getting a publisher was like, okay, who published Eddie Robles's book? Who published John Harris's books? Apparently, Zach Garris published his second book, which was more or less like a. Yeah, he is. Maybe I should have called him up and see how that would have worked, but I don't know. I just went with a self-publishing service for the meantime because the book's a little too hot for certain Christian publishers. So it's like one publisher accepted us, and then they're like, I guess they read it and like, we're not going to do business with you anymore. And it's like another publisher wanted to kind of tone down the book a little too much, and I just didn't want to pursue the relationship with that. So I just went with myself, and I'll reap all the financial benefits, I guess, because that's kind of how it works. Too hot for Canon. Now the thing about Canon is you need a lit agent to query them, and I don't know how you get a lit agent that's not woke or gay or something. I don't. To me, I imagine if you're big enough, they come to you. But I'm not big enough.
I've got a project in the works with Canon.
Oh, really?
But it's, I mean, I think if it's the right content and they get to know you, they would talk to you.
Okay. Maybe I was too small at the time, so maybe one day me and Canon Press, and I'd love their promotional material, or I'd love their promos they'd run for me. I don't know if my next book would get, because I'm already kind of planning what my next. I have like 2 book ideas that I'm in the works on. One of them is going to be 6 Idols to Smash. I don't think Canon.
No,
Press
that's good.
I don't think Canon Press will touch that.
That sounds like exactly the kind of thing they'd want to print.
Well, not when one of the idols is something that me and Jug Wilson would disagree on. So
Okay, well, maybe that.
So maybe the book after that, which would be more related to business and, personal finance and stuff, matters like taking control over what you can take control over and elite theory and stuff like that. But more on that later. We definitely diverged on publishing stuff. Jeff, you got a book coming?
No, I've got milk cows that have to be milked, so I don't think I'm writing anything anytime soon of substantial length.
So we can keep some questions coming from the chat. I don't know if Anthony had any questions for tonight.
I mean, again, I've already kind of pitched the idea of, run Mike Law as your candidate, as your standard bearer, get him on the platform, and you need to start getting more seats at the table. That's how the SBC can be retaken. Because if you're not winning the president and then that vote trickles down year in and year out, it's like you almost need to just get someone there in the conversation. That way, when you go to nominate the president, your speech is about what this guy has done for the SBC. Because I think that's going to be a selling point for a lot of those squishes in the middle. And those squishes in the middle are the 30% that voted for the law amendment, but did not vote for a conservative candidate. So that's roughly 30% of the vote from the last SBC. So you need to get those people to break for your side. And the way you do that is run someone that's somewhat of an insider. And that's why I would say get Mike Law on the platform. And then just keep getting other people on the platform to be your candidates.
Is Mike Law from Texas?
Virginia, I thought.
Virginia.
Oh.
He's in Virginia for sure. Yeah.
I feel like for Dallas, you need to run a Texas local.
There's no point in going for the president next year. You just need to get someone in the VPs or something.
I mean, it depends on how Clint Presley does. So maybe just go around. Do you think Clint Presley will be better or worse than Bart Barber? I'm going to say he's not going to be as bad because I think he's going to be more competent as president. Anthony, your thoughts?
I mean, yeah, I think he'll be an upgrade, but at the same time, you are dealing with the fact that a lot of your headwinds are no longer active. I mean, Bart Barber should have came out and said that the SBC does not have an abuse crisis. And instead, he took on a lot of bad PR during his presidency. I don't think you're going to have a wave of bad PR over the next 2 years. And Clint Presley kind of has it a little bit more on easy street.
Jeff?
A little bit long answer here, fellas, staying on brand.
Go ahead.
But, so for the last couple of years, I've been very confused about how Al Mohler has conducted himself in the SBC. And I've wondered why he doesn't realize that his base is eroding underneath him. He, as you already mentioned, he just survived a struggle session that was very clearly it was very clearly aimed at shaming him and humiliating him. Al cares about those kinds of things. As I've already said, I think Clint represents an attempt by Al to kind of pull more influence back through the presidency towards his own perspective. And so Clint will be better than Bart to the exact degree that Al Mohler influences him more. And that, to me, still seems a very uncertain question. I think Clint really has affections for Al. But Clint is going to feel the exact same pressures monetarily, future positions on offer, things like that made Bart Barber what he became. Maybe some of your listeners won't know this, but Bart, once upon a time, was a guy that I disagreed with in public on things like Calvinism, but I really respected him because he seemed to be a principled man who would hear his opponents out and would have an honest conversation and an honest disagreement. But he was corrupted by the SBC's mechanisms. And so there's real power there. If Clint, under Mohler's wing, can wisely choose to listen to Al's, voice, I don't think Al's perfect, but Al's better than what we have had influencing us in the J.D. Greer era. And so Am I hopeful? 51, 52, 53%. Because I think there
I
is a
mean,
real
but
chance.
you're saying essentially Al can get us seats at the table, and then
Yeah. And Al, even if he doesn't, I don't know if Al would put people like us and our perspective at the table, but Al shares more of our perspective than most SBC elites do. And so it would be better if he does that. Would it be satisfactory? No. Would it be what we need for the future? No. But it does have the potential to be better. And maybe it could be the beginning of a small snowball that rolls downhill. So there's me trying to be optimistic.
All right. Michael, better or Clint better or Clint worse than Bart?
I don't know. I don't know Clint well enough to say. I can tell you what I observed in the room. Bart he was very effective as a moderator, and that is, I think that's really critical because I found myself in the run up to the convention. I didn't interact with him on Twitter directly, but I just saw some of the interactions that he had with other people, and I wasn't impressed with him. But then at the convention, I was like, man, he has this room eaten out of the palm of his hand because he's folksy, he's funny, and folksy and funny is how you win the SBC. People don't care about your theological arguments. You can be right all day long. People want to like the guy that is leading them, and that's how normie Christians think. And we have to win over normie Christians and to show them that what we believe isn't the boogeyman. It's not the scary thing that you've been told. What we believe is really something that is normal and historic and good. And so I think that I don't know Clint if he has that, but I know that Bart had that, and I thought he used it to great effect. And
Ed
that
Litton did
probably,
not have that.
yeah. I'm looking at the chat. Joshua Claver said, Michael, are you saying Jared Moore is folksy but not funny? That's a funny comment. I'm not going to answer that question.
So let me weigh in just to give a retrospect. What did we know about Bart Barber, say 2 years ago when he was first president? And what I was pretty aware because he was, I believe, the chair of the resolutions committee. I know he's on it, which brought out some pretty liberal resolutions while he was on it. He was Ed Litton's biggest simp. When Ed Litton's doing plagiarism, Bart Barber was, diving. He was the meme where the person's jumping in front of a poo to take a bullet in the Simpsons meme. And he was also third on deck to run for SBC because Willie Rice was the platform candidate. Then he got deacon gated. Now Willie Rice is one of the good guys, strange as that is. But I think Willie Rice is, I don't think you could run him now because I don't think they like him anymore. And then who was the other person that they had lined up? Or it was Ed Litton was really plan A to run him for reelect. And then Willie Rice was plan B. And then Bart Barber was plan C. So they had a bench, and somehow Bart Barber got it because he was a loyal guy to the platform. As far as Clint Presley, what do we know about him now? He's woke. He's definitely woke. Had an illegal immigrant at his church, on his church staff, so not exactly patriotic. Liberal on immigration, which kind of is a bad message to send to the nation at this time. And we know he's pretty loyal to the company. Maybe has some personal issues at his church, but
his headline risk is considerably reduced. I mean, I think a lot of the baggage the SBC has taken, it's already baked into the cake. I mean, the problem is you basically took on a sex abuse scandal that you didn't actually have, and you basically bear the bad publicity from that. So I think he has a very easy path as far as just don't take on any new baggage and try to mitigate the baggage that, was taken on over the past 3 years.
Well, this is a looming crisis for the the other team on the far side of the gap here. They strategically have made use of abuse claimants to bolster their political ambitions, right? They want to run off what they're calling the fundamentalists. And they had this very narratively fashionable mechanism to do it with, which was this idea, this laughable idea, there's some kind of abuse crisis in the SBC. But what has been clear at this point is they are never going to actually honor the wishes of the abuse claimants. They're happy to use them to broker political power, but they're never going to actually open up the coffers, specifically the North American Mission Board coffers. That's the big financial nest egg in the SBC, which is what the abuse claimants want access to. And so at some point, that volcano is going to burst on their side. I think that Mike Keybone actually represents the first rumbles that we saw this, because Mike is the kind of guy who would have pushed to open those financial coffers for abuse claimants.
And he was on the task force.
Right. And Bruce Frank, who's also on the task force, was immediately trotted out to run when Keybone was announced. Why is that? Because Bruce Frank is the kind of guy who will keep the process that we've already seen. Oh, yes, we want to honor abuse claimants, but we will never open the financial coffers. And so he was there to make sure Keybone didn't actually break the piggy bank. That is going to come to a head for the. I think it's going to work out where the abuse claimants realize they've been played. But that is going to come to a head on their side of the camp, and whatever fallout comes from that should be advantageous to those of us who want to see a healthy SBC.
So, Yellow Moth asked, I'm doing a last call for questions, but we got a lot of questions in the chat, so just assume it's last call time. Have you guys thought about banding together and hiring a political consultant? I don't know how much.
I mean, I'll give you the advice for free. Oh yeah, I've already given you who your candidate needs to be.
I don't know if that's the correct answer, though, but who knows?
Your point about him having name recognition is right on. But if you get to know Mike Law, and I'm not close to Mike, but I've gotten to know him over the last couple of years, Mike's not a politician. Mike's one of the nicest guys in the world. What I need you to do is figure out how to get Mike Law to run and to take that on, because it's just not his disposition. You know, we're such a cynical age. It's hard
Al Mueller is, but I don't think he would run.
No, I mean,
yeah. Well, again, Nashville was a catastrophe for Al when he was a presidential candidate. But with Mike is legitimately just a nice guy who believes the Bible and thinks other people ought to too. And he tried to take on an obligation that really isn't in his disposition to push the law amendment. And so what I need you to do is help him see, hey, actually, this is a calling. That
I think the more you float it out into the ether that he's the guy, the more, eventually, again, we're talking for...
You're manifesting.
Yeah. Well, we're talking 2026, not 2025. Yeah. So we're talking 2 years, unless you get him on the platform next year as like a VP, which just means you're a heartbeat away. But even still, he gets on to some committee.
Yeah, and from
the other thing is, you got to challenge the ERLC on something different than abolitionism. I think the majority of the SBC is not abolitionist.
I also think you shouldn't have. Tom Askell shouldn't have brought up the animal rights video. I thought that was a strategic blunder.
Like you should have only asked about gun control. That's the only issue.
The Tennessee thing.
I would ask about the covenant shooter.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the only.
But I mean, I'm not gonna. If Tom Askell wants to talk about parrots, I'm going to support Tom. But I
understand. I'm just saying, if you only have one bullet in the chamber at this point.
Well, here's the thing. I think there's two plays with Brent Leatherwood. One, a motion of censure. I say you run that next year. Do a censure on because of the Covenant shooting and him using Southern Baptist resources for a personal pet project, and have it be worded like that. We didn't vote on this. There's no resolution you can point to justify suppressing this. And we have XXX resolutions that probably support the free press. I imagine those exist. And just point to that. And the other is to try to unseat the messengers of his church for having female pastors. Like that, I think those are your two plays with Brent Leatherwood. And I think you should do that to multiple people on the platform. If they want to say that we don't need a Mike Law amendment because the process works, well, it's time to start using the process then.
Right. And that's one thing that your listeners can help. The Credentials Committee is publicly available, and you can turn in the churches you know and make public your credentials evaluation request.
Now, you do have to be a Southern Baptist to do that, right?
Yeah, I'm just assuming you've got plenty of listeners who have some relationship to the SBC.
This is why I
viewers.
can't do. I'm not Southern Baptist, and if I were, I would.
Well, come on in,
all
brother.
day.
We've got lots of churches we can put you in that you'd be a help to.
If I move, I'll consider it. But I go to an independent church, and they probably wouldn't be interested, and I'm not gonna be this troublemaker because I've been going there a super long time. I'm not gonna be the troublemaker that's like, hey, let's join the Southern Baptist Convention so we can troll them at the convention once a year, and please send me as a messenger to do that. I don't know if that's a good sales pitch to the members of my church.
I've not heard a downside yet. That sounds wonderful. Anyway,
I don't know. Let's see. Yellowmall says, how can you be in a denomination that's mixed on Calvinism and Arminianism? I think the answer to this is they've changed over time.
Well, and historically, we have been that. Historically, the founders of Southern Seminary, for instance, staunch Calvinists, were able to find an authentic gospel that they could work with non-Calvinists on. Now, what they do in discipleship, this becomes a real question. I'm not trying to minimize any of that. But there was a prolonged period where Southern Baptists could actually hold this in tension and work together.
Now, also, Baptists were in a race across the country with Methodists. Historically speaking, it's we were racing across this country and the frontier with Methodists. So you better be thankful that Southern Baptist won, hopefully, as opposed to Methodist. Michael, I don't know if you had an answer for that one.
The Calvinism, Arminianism question.
How can it be both? I feel like we've kind of talked about that as well, but I'm just trying to catch up on chat. Should it be saved? That's the Southern Baptist Convention.
Yes.
Yes.
I think we're all in agreement on that. Just the question is how, because again, I want to save it. I just think the divest and parallel institutions while remaining in strategic giving. I think it's all part of a greater plan to maximize our ability to save the SBC, but also not waste the resources that a church has and steward them more wisely. So I think we all want the same goal here, at least.
I just think strategically, it's like bringing a knife to a gunfight. I mean, you might inflict some damage, but the guy with the gun is going to win in the long run, and the SBC is the guy with the gun.
Yeah.
So I think we gotta fight for the SBC within the SBC as best we can.
And Black Bear, how can the SBC disciple young people so they are not someone like Andy Stanley?
Man, that's
healthy
a question.
Local churches. Healthy local churches are who disciple young people. So we use seminaries for like finishing schools, but churches make disciples and churches make pastors. And
should everyone go to seminary?
Not Dan Darling. Dan Darling shouldn't have went to seminary.
Well played.
The crux of the matter is the healthy local church. And so here's where the SBC becomes a factor for local churches. We educate a tremendous amount of evangelical pastors. And so we need healthy local churches discipling and developing pastors. And we need them to be able to make use of SBC seminaries as healthy finishing schools, not the kind of people who groom betrayers to go back to SBC churches and move it leftward. So we disciple by being faithful to Scripture at the local church level.
I mean, it is very much the local church level. I mean, again, and the other thing they just do have to consider when young people are very bifurcated, that's a huge problem, especially when you're looking at like the male-female political divide, and a lot of churches cater more towards the female than the man. And they do that starting with the music. I mean, let's just be honest with ourselves. I have a whole article in the queue that's probably been in the queue for a month about, returning to tradition. I talk about the music.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You have an article that I haven't published for a month?
I have it. It's still on my drive, but yeah, it talks about the music. The
First
fact
I'm
that
hearing of this.
like I have a whole thing on, like, I'm pretty sure like Vertex Church is in the SBC, and all these churches
They left last
was,
year.
but
They left.
yeah, all these churches sing his music. So I mean, things like that are how you disciple young people a lot better, as far as instead of getting them on the K-Love train.
Right Now Media train. My church does that, and it's like, okay, I joined Right Now Media because, Evangelical Dark Web could benefit from me having eyes inside there. I'm like, wow, why does every person they're pushing suck? It's David Platt, Francis Chan, Eric Mason, surprisingly, a lot of love on Right Now Media. A lot of gold, silver, and livestock. Hallelujah. Right there. I don't know if you had an answer for this question, Michael.
Yeah, I think the issue there is that what we are manufacturing from the church planting pipeline is Andy Stanley type clones, because the managerial approach to ministry, there's a template that you follow, and the template doesn't require the Holy Spirit to be at work. You crank out your product, and so there's a template. There's like, here's the songs you sing. Andy Stanley has. So here's an anecdote. There's a guy I know that was asked to preach at a church, and the preacher, or the senior pastor, told him, it's like, well, we use Andy Stanley's preaching method, which is, it's like, me, we, God, us, you, or something like that. It's like, and he's like, well, that doesn't really fit my text. He said, no, you have to preach it this way. And he insisted, because that's the template. They preach a template. And that's what happens with, like, church planters are kind of trained in how to do this. And so I did some writing on my own Substack. I call the Wild Wild West of church planting, that just sort of documents how this happens, to where we follow a mega church model, because you can get thousands of people, and it's not hard. It's not hard to get a lot of people to show up in a room and think that they're doing church, and they're not doing church. It's a lot harder to make disciples. That's hard. And I just don't think a lot of people have the stomach for it. And so that's one of the ticking time bombs in the SBC, is that who we're manufacturing right now are these Andy Stanley type clones. And soon that's a growing percentage of our messengers, is people coming from that environment. Yeah. And they're not equipped to do hard theological work that is necessary for Reformation.
Fun fact, I've been to a church that was very inspired by Andy Stanley. That a lot of people are surprised on that one. But this is, again, I was not seeped in Big Eva culture growing up. So it's like, oh, and I had a lot of issues with that church. And I kind of was never bought into that church in the first place. So there's an origin story to how I became what I am. Let's see. And my skepticism towards mega churches and aspiring mega churches. If Presley stinks badly, why not run Mueller? I don't think Mueller wants to run after 2021.
I mean, you could either be a seminary president or SBC president. And one of those positions is a lot more temporary than the other.
I think we've kind of beaten this horse on the chat. Let's see. What was our next question? I'm not sure how many good men with strong theology can really be known outside of their own regions, though. How do you know who you pick as solid? I guess this is for president.
I mean, if someone with someone with an online presence, you can kind of know whether they're solid or not. It's just getting someone that has the name ID to win. And that's kind of the problem. I mean, Jared Moore is a solid theologian. If you read his book, he has some great teaching in there that's not even, I won't say directly germane to the idea of concupiscence, but he just has he has very good theology that's expressed. And so even if you're not like struggling with some kind of addiction, of sexual nature, the book is actually a good read. And yeah, the problem is that just doesn't win elections.
Yeah. You got to be folksy and funny.
College football,
Right.
Yeah.
farm animals.
Well, you know, Bart has made so much hay out of his farm animal names. I named a heifer Russ Moore Sucks, and it didn't really get me anywhere. So I don't think that strategy is portable.
Oh man.
Now, Russell Moore's Jared Moore's dad, isn't he?
Yes, and Beth Moore's his mom.
Could you imagine? That's the worst thing I've heard in like years.
That's
The
actually
worst thing it would be if someone made that into a meme.
That's actually the plot for the next. That's the plot for the next Omen movie.
They are making a prequel or something like that to it, right? Or a sequel or something. How long can conservative wing last without substantial wings at the SBC? Well, you guys are trying to last all the way.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about eight.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that
We did open with 8 to 10 years, and there would be female pastors widely accepted. Well, officially.
The Southern Baptist Convention is going to be here 100 years from now, if the Lord doesn't
You think
return.
so?
Yes. The question is, what's it going to be? It could be our best friend or our greatest enemy, but it'll be here. I don't see it going anywhere. It's too big and powerful.
I have some theories about that because I think the North American Mission Board might be a financial house of cards, maybe. I mean, we obviously no one's seen the numbers, but it could be a financial house of cards. The large seminaries that we have, huge operating budgets. They've had a lot of tuition issues or issues getting students enrollment issues. So these institutions could collapse rather quickly.
Well, I mean, NAM has has multiple years of operating budget in its
Institutions
savings.
of this size, the
seminaries
they're too big to fail.
The seminaries have more issue, but the idea is, but maybe you could click and drag columns from NAM over into the seminaries. That's one possibility of how NAM would be subverted, but.
Once you get to this size, they have. I mean, I don't know details on this, but institutions of this size, they have endowments. They have things to cushion any low enrollment years. They don't die. I mean, Princeton. Jeff mentioned Princeton a while back. Princeton is still around.
Yeah, but King's College is folding in New York. Thank God, because they're super liberal.
Took a while. Took a long while.
It is possible. And the Southern Baptist Convention has 6 seminaries.
Yeah,
if they consolidate down to 4, that's foreseeable.
Well, sure, and could is true. Could fall. Likely to, I think, is the issue, and it's unlikely, very unlikely. I'll just point you to the ERLC, and you don't have to do this with SBC stuff. You can do this with the Gospel Coalition. Nobody pays attention to the Gospel Coalition. They get no engagement. They get no. They're not surviving on like goodwill, voluntary donations.
I am not sure I agree with that.
They're surviving by cooperating with bad actors. The ERLC has no constituency. Brent Leatherwood took a job that nobody wanted, and it's obvious nobody wanted him and nobody wanted the job. But the nameplate still exists because they can go get Facebook money. They can go get immigration table money. And the nameplate is going to show up in the New York Times. I'm at a smaller conference right now, and a friend of mine in a different denomination said, look, man, the SBC matters. And I know that because when they do stuff, it shows up on the front page of the New York Times. And that nameplate is going to continue to carry heft, even if it's completely hollowed out and being worn by, like Aaron McIntyre, I think is the one who said this, being worn like a skin suit by people who are antithetical to everything the ERLC was supposed to be formed to do. So the nameplate alone is worth bad guys buying and continuing to use.
Yeah.
So let me disagree with you on the Gospel Coalition point. They might have, nil social media engagement, but they are, in terms of faith and spirituality as a category, they are a top 50 website in that category, or maybe top 60. But so that leaves very few organizations that are bigger than them. Desiring God is one, and Got Questions is, I believe, number one in the category. That's not a Bible app. So it is. They are huge, and that's why I say we're going to cover.
The counter I would offer to that is, we started talking about how the SBC could collapse by a lack of financial undergirding. Well, the financial undergirding that's driving TGC is pagan sources. And so I don't think that even the people who are most associated with the TGC, they don't talk about TGC unless it's a TGC platform issue. It's not a ladder, but it's going to continue to exist because it has high search engine optimization rankings. That's what the nameplate's worth.
Yeah. I think it has. Yeah. It's more about they have a massive email list, and they just get a percentage from that. But I'm still not entirely convinced that that's the source that they're donating. I've been actually looking into who donates to the Gospel Coalition. This is actually some very recent research that I've been doing. It seems like a lot of legacy family foundations. They might donate to Alliance Defending Freedom, and then they'll donate to the Gospel Coalition. I was like, what? But
well, brother, what you're talking about there, the SBC has in spades. There are countless wills and trusts that are paying, that keep Brent Leatherwood living in Brentwood, Tennessee, and the people who donated it would be horrified to look at what he pushes with their money, but they're gone, and yet the trust is carrying on.
Let's see. Andy Stanley was son of an SBC president. Yes, that's true. Moving from YouTube to Rumble or X? No. YouTube has actually decreased its censorship this year. Oddly enough, they've decreased their censorship this year. I mean, as long as I don't talk about certain 2020 events, I think I'm fine. And am in the clear. Like, you can do the JQ. Maybe not drop a certain F word regarding Pride Month, but literally, you can now say the A word, as in, abortion, and not get demonetized immediately now. They've actually relaxed their standards on monetization, which therefore censorship on a lot of things. Some degenerate stuff as well, though. So I think YouTube's actually kind of moderated a little bit, but maybe they'll change their tune when November gets closer, but I don't actually see that happening, because I think a lot of people don't care about this election cycle, but that's just me. Yellowmall says, do you think it will follow the track of the PCUSA splitting into the PCUS splitting into PCUSA, OPC, and the PCA? How is the PCUSA doing these days? I mean, I don't think it's going to follow that track, and I think one split has already happened with the CBF.
I mean, the problem with that strategy or that proposal is it already happened with the General Baptist of Texas splitting off and the Cooperative Baptist.
No, the Baptist Convention of Texas is older than the Southern Baptist Convention of Texas. I thought it was the SBC that created these competing entities, and they have the same thing going on in Virginia.
I mean, I forget. I mean, there's a lot of.
There's a few dueling competing.
It's like the Baylor Baptist split, and everyone split back in I guess the 60s or whatever. So a lot that split has already happened, and the SBC lived on. So I don't necessarily know if you could replicate that again, especially when a lot of.
I was just going to say we tend to split more fragmentary. People tend to think that they'll create their own new thing now, and there's just not a lot of coalescence in Southern Baptist life outside of the SBC as it exists.
And it's probably important to note that non-denominationalism has been really surpassing denominations. So a lot of those churches that might be in the SBC or are very theologically Baptist are non-denominational.
I'm going to ask one final question. What do you think is how much do you think we can get like independent churches to join the SBC just to join this mission?
The Dusty Devers approach.
Because that seems like the best way to get new messengers.
Well, to join, but from my understanding, it's like you have to go through a local association and a state convention. So, as Jeff, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. Is that accurate?
Well, I mean, it's probably a matter of whose team you're wanting to join within the group, because we're not playing with the same rule book as the fashionable people. But most Baptist entities are going to take you on a voluntary basis. So if you want to join, you're going to connect with your local, like Michael just said, connect with your state, send a few bucks to the SBC, and you'll get in pretty quick because at its heart, our current SBC wants more numbers, and they're very willing to do that very quickly. But go on, Michael. I've got a follow-up after that.
Well, I just want to say, if that's the case, then there are some filters or hoops to jump through. But I think it's possible. People have to be convinced to care, and I think that's worth pursuing. But it is also worth noting that we have a lot of churches already in the SBC that just could be activated, and I think that it's not necessarily an either or. But I wouldn't want to rely on a bring in outside help strategy to the exclusion of. I think more of the stronger strategies, like we got people in the SBC, they're giving money already. They've got messengers already if they want them. They need to care and be mobilized.
All right. So Jeff, where can people find you?
Twitter, merely J Wright, is pretty much the best place.
All right. Michael?
D. Michael Clary is my handle on Twitter. And whenever I do things in other places, I always post it on Twitter. So that's the best place.
Since we're wrapping up, I get to say smash the like button. Do that on your way out for sure. Again, we can support Evangelical Dark Web at our Patreon-like system, evangelicaldarkweb.org/join. But the least you can do, the very least you can do is subscribe if you are new to the channel, to the podcast, and smash that like button. Least you can do. Have a blessed night, and we will catch you all on the next one. Stay based, Christ.